Welcome back. This time we are going to see into the causes of Harris's loss. And let's start with the most obvious, misogyny. Misogyny definitely was not a cause. Probably marginally in very small numbers, but definitely no was not a real cause. Some other people have already mentioned the numbers that Clinton got, and she was a woman among Hispanics, the working class. And I would like to add another fact is that if you consider Harris's numbers as vice president in late July, when Biden dropped out of the race, and how these numbers rose to very high levels until early September, when Harris came with her economic message. You can see that misogyny is not was not the cause unless you accept that misogyny took a break from late July to early September. So let's the results are so tragic that we need to be serious when we are considering the causes of Harris's loss, especially because of the magnitude of her loss. It was much worse than Clinton's and in every single front. Actually, the two of the fronts where she made improvement were among people with incomes above $100,000 and the well-educated. So if we don't want to repeat this tragedy, we should demand seriousness. And then I would like to address Farid Zakaria's most recent article where he explores this issue. And he mentions three causes: immigration, the trials against Trump, and the weight of the woke far left on the Biden administration. On immigration, the problem is that Democratic Biden specifically let cool activists dictate policy at the border. And they came with this big prank that consisted on letting people use the institution of asylum to bypass the restrictive immigration laws that we have. The result was chaos, at the border, and the results are what we see. If you see the Gallup poll, you see that before Biden, the trends were favorable to immigrants, especially after 4 years of Trump's cruelty. Yes, yet the way this chaotic way in he mishandled immigration turned this issue into a liability where even the CBO acknowledges the positive effects immigration had, even in those chaotic terms in the economy. Then I agree on the trials. We went first through with this election interference trial linked to Stormy Daniels, and turn this election interference trial into the hush money trial. And then that became a circus when we should have focused on the Georgia election interference that was more serious and wouldn't have let Trump capitalize sympathy in his favor as he portrays himself as the victim. But yet there is another factor that was noticed by Bill Maher, and I agree with Bill Maher. Merrick Garland waited too much. He was too shy, too afraid of look political. And so he waited and waited and waited until the trials got so close to the elections that got the results we know. So they were obviously Trump extended the trials and make them so the decisions could not be known until after the elections. And now that that's the case, all these cases, even the cases in which he was found guilty, will not sentence him, will not happen. So this was a gross miscalculation that is unacceptable in the case of something like the Justice Department. And then I completely agree with the woke culture. His criticism of the woke culture. Here we have two parts, if you want. First, where Kamala Harris's promise in the 2019 primary that included transgender surgery for detained migrants. And many candidates on those days pandered to the woke left. This could have been very easily resolved just by following Roosevelt's advice. If you made a mistake, admit it frankly and try something else. Just admit that you were wrong, and the voters will welcome you and give you a second chance. But no, the Democrats, the mediocre campaign managers, are so afraid of admitting a mistake that they try to spin Kamala Harris's answer, and the result is that Trump used that fact to in one of his most air ads, and use her answer against her. Then we have more recent events, like, for instance, events linked to women in sports, trans women in sports. You could have said that is wrong. You could an experiment in states like California to decriminalize shoplifting and other felonies that backfired and has been corrected in Proposition 63 or 36. So you could have acknowledged a mistake. And then on immigration, you could have also acknowledged mistakes made at the southern border, because you could have at least proposed to strip the work permit from visas and turn them into stipends, so the detention centers could have channeled that labor to the states and cities in the Midwest, for instance, that needed immigrants to revitalize their economies. Instead, they gave them, they turned these work permits into a magnet for new waves of people who desperately try to pass themselves as asylum seekers. And with the work permit under their arm, they told them, go free, go wherever you want. The result is what we know. And unfortunately, is under Trump, it's not just them who are going to pay the consequences, are all the other immigrants on whom Trump is going to display unseen cruelty just to satisfy his base. Then these are the issues presented by Farid Zakaria, but there are even more important issues. Those are the ones presented by Farid Zakaria himself, but in more detail with a statistical work more thorough by Thomas Piketty. And that is how the Democratic Party has turned itself into the party of the well-educated and neglected their commitments to the working class, the commitments that in the times of Roosevelt made of Roosevelt the hero of the working class. And we can see those in the demographics from the exit polls in the 2024 elections. But even more troublesome are the results on income, because this is the first election in which voters with income under 50,000 and even less than 100,000 for the first time turn Republican. Do you remember the chart from the New York Fed about inflation uncertainty, the attitudes of those, how high was this uncertainty for voters with incomes around $50,000? Well, it fits in this explanation. And it's very worrisome because this is a turning point that, as I mentioned before in my previous video, could be the first step into consolidating this trend in terms that are going to be much more difficult to reverse. Another symptom that makes me worry is the Ipsos poll revealing that a majority of Americans support mass deportations. And it means a full rationalization of Trump's cruelty. Remember that Trump's cruelty doesn't happen 20 years ago. It happened 4 years ago. Now, what are the consequences of this defeat? In immediate terms, in the very short term, you will see improvisation. Like, for instance, the sad way in which you see the Biden administration rushing grants under the CHIPS Act or military aid to Ukraine. And this could be defined as too little, too late. I have no doubt that Trump is going to turn his back on Ukraine, despite the effects that is going to have on China, and that much of the grants that have not been granted under the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act are going to be given for anything but what Biden intended. But I believe Biden deserves to see his legacy destroyed because he has been a mediocre president. He should have withdrawn much earlier. Johnson withdrew in March. He waited until July, and just because he wanted to run for a re-election, even though he should have remembered, especially he should have taken into account that he was in no conditions to face debates or the hard path, the hard rhythm that a campaign imposes. Then we will see what has not even been tried. And we will not hear of them. Like, for instance, the problems with the grid. Brookings had a very sound proposal to eliminate this bottleneck by reforming permitting, by consolidating it at the federal level. But and yet that didn't happen, and most probably it's not going to happen under Trump. Actually, this could have been adapted up to 4 million units to housing, but that never happened because after early September, Harris Harris was much more focused on portraying herself as the continuation of Biden, or how close she was to the Chinese. Then we will see in this very short term the laughable, that it is tragic, is Biden making a final push to get a ceasefire in the Middle East, when even a child could wonder why would Netanyahu sign a ceasefire under Biden's terms, when he can get pretty much everything he wants from Trump. So this is the kind of ridiculousness that is going to be part of the Biden's legacy. What are my fears? That economic dissatisfaction was what turned the economic woes of East Germany into cultural attitudes favorable to the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland. If you let me a more extreme case I mentioned in my previous video, economic dissatisfaction, international humiliation, was what led the Weimar Republic, the weak Weimar Republic, into the Third Reich. And as I mentioned, attitudes toward immigration and the change in voting patterns in the working class from 20 to 24 make me fear that this could take place during the Trump administration. And hopefully, by the end of the Trump administration, the second Trump administration, is not going to be too late to reverse these trends, because cultural trends are much more difficult to reverse. And then another consequence for the next 4 years could be, especially using Biden's grants and other tools like tax cuts and the regulation, is to create a group that doesn't have to be new. It could be just the old guys, into a kind of crony capitalism, that is the kind of capitalism that is that has consolidated Orban's power in Hungary. So what to do next? What can we do? Number one, follow the example of FDR. Read at least the Hilsig's book, The New Deal, and learn something about the New Deal, because you cannot learn the lessons about the New Deal if you don't read about the New Deal. And as I said in my first video, start with ideas. We need to create a range between the rational right and ideas at the rational left, to create a range of rational ideas with which, after giving them visibility, we can push politicians. Otherwise, we will be always waiting for politicians to give us a solution. They will not, with ideas will go under the radar, and the trends we have seen will become as difficult to reverse as they are now in Russia with Putin. And having said that, thank you.
Good evening. This is Brian Thomas Simons, and these are the main headlines of this hour.
A. Biden makes counterproposal to Zelensky's victory plan. Because President Biden has to use all resources available to help his friend Bibi in Israel. We have offered the Ukrainian president our moral support and a speech to back a Kickstarter campaign to be used to fund the Ukrainian army until 2025, declared National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. B. Trump offers full support to Netanyahu but, different from Biden, he declared he would not back the Israeli Prime Minister unconditionally. As proof of that, the presidential candidate shared with the American public opinion the price list he gave Netanyahu. 1. Regular aid, $4 billion aid, package the United States normally provides Israel. 2. Israel Advantage, $12 billion aid plus 2 brigades to clear up Gaza and the West Bank for new Israeli settlements. This package requires Israel to pay the Trump Organization 10% of the aforementioned amount. 3. Israel Premium, $8 billion aid plus 3 brigades to be sitting ducks in order to get an excuse to go after Iran. This package requires Israel to issue permits to build 2 Trump hotels in Tel Aviv and 5% royalty for mandatory use of Trump's name by Israeli tech companies Mobileye and CyberArk. C. Following the advice of Secretary of State Blinken and National Security Sullivan, President Biden will implement a new China policy. 1. Selling $1 billion to Taiwan and the Philippines each so they can defend themselves against China even though there is no wargame scenario where they can stop China without the United States involvement. 2. Badmouthing President Xi on social media with armies of trolls that will do ghosting to his posts and create memes of him. 3. Banning Americans from investing in TikTok and Panda Express. After learning of President Biden's new policy, President Xi laughed and called President Putin to announce China would join North Korea militarily in their support of Vladimir Putin in the Ukraine war. Likewise, President Pezeshkian announced Iran would also join the new coalition. D. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu again kidnapped President Biden in new visit to Tel Aviv. The president was released after he agreed to campaign for Vice President Harris against her wishes. Bibi is my friend, declared President Biden. It's just that he hasn't learned yet the lessons of 9/11, but I beat Medicare. Reacting to the news, former Senator Kerry declared, he did the same to me in 2014. But Bibi is my friend too. Far-right personalities Laura Loomer and Ann Coulter met at a Kentucky event and were taken by fans as part of shock rock singer Marilyn Manson's band. Them ladies look like the real ones from the Manson crew, declared a fan. Once the misunderstanding was clarified, it happened they had been convoked by a fellow right-winger, Pastor Randy Adams, to witness the second coming of Jesus. To the brethren's disappointment, Jesus came back but called for compassion for immigrants, gays, and the poor and was immediately re-crucified as, evidently, an impostor. The real Jesus would have called a mob to expel colored immigrants, the gays, and the poor from the good USA as real Jesus expelled the money changers from the temple. It's just common sense, declared Pastor Adams. Trying to revert their low appeal among the working class. DNC Chair Jamie Harrison convokes strategists from the woke left to draft a new strategy leading to this end. The latter came up with a comprehensive plan that includes 1. Male blue-collars will have to attend workshops to deconstruct toxic masculinity as a condition of employment. 2. Blue-collars will have to ask one another their pronouns every day just after clocking in order not to invisibilize gender-fluid people. 3. Blue-collars will attend pride marches on their days off. The options will be LGBTQ plus pride, Latinx pride, BLM pride, and other BIPOC pride. 4. White blue-collars will have to apologize for slavery as part of their annual evaluation. 5. Just after clocking out, blue-collars will be invited to discussion groups where they will discuss inclusion and representation in the series, movies, and video games approved by the woke strategists, who also will become DEI consultants of these companies. 6. Blue-collars will have to display the colors of the diversity flags that represent them as part of their uniforms. Acceptable pieces of clothing for this end will be scarves, shawls, kerchiefs, and others approved by the DEI consultants. 7. Blue-collars will have to account for at least one intimate experience with a BIPOC or LGBTQ+ person as part of their annual evaluation. Blue-collars will be deducted $480 in 2025, payable in monthly $50 installments, to contribute to financing these activities. DNC Chair Jamie Harrison declared that Trump's landslide victory can be explained because voters, confused, believed they were voting like in Big Brother, for the candidate they wanted out, and vowed Kamala, who will be re-nominated in 2028, will do exactly the same as in 2024 with just one difference. A warning about the voting method to prevent this misunderstanding from happening again. Reassured by these declarations, people willing to represent the Democratic Party in the 2026 elections will a. Promise sex conversion surgery for undocumented immigrants, but warn that the vote for Congress is not like in Big Brother. B. Change the punishment for shoplifting from time in prison to a reprimand, but warn that the vote for Congress is not like in Big Brother. C. Reprimand voters in advance, just in case they don't look enthusiastic about voting for them, but warn that the vote for Congress is not like in Big Brother. D. Rally with the most hated politicians from the present and recent past, especially if voters are angry at the status quo, but warn that the vote for Congress is not like in Big Brother. E. Say nothing about the issues the voters want to hear and instead tell them you have a Glock, but warn that the vote for Congress is not like in Big Brother. F. Get Queen Latifah and Whoopi Goldberg to endorse you and promise to replace the police with social workers and the Boy Scouts, but warn that the vote for Congress is not like in Big Brother.
This has been the news of this hour.